Dealing with a horse that fights pressure can be difficult, and it can also get your horse in some potentially dangerous situations. If your horse has never been taught to yield to pressure, that means their initial response is going to be to fight the pressure, as sometimes horses can view pressure as something to escape, so something that they want to flee or run away from. So what I want to do today is going through certain exercises I like to use in order to teach my horses to respond to pressure, and specifically respond to pressure in situations where it could potentially be dangerous for them, like getting their leg caught in something, or maybe being tied, or even if they get their head caught in the fence, how they should respond to that. So I'll go over that in a minute, but what I first want to do is just talk about the basic concept of using pressure and release for training your horse. Horses learn by the release of pressure. So let's just say I ask Tucker to lower his head by pulling down on my lead rope. So as soon as he responds correctly and lowers his head, I release the pressure and let go. So by releasing pressure, he learns that he responded correctly and he did the right thing. When it comes to using this technique to train your horse, it's vitally important that you know when to release the pressure. Because if I'm holding the pressure and Tucker lowers his head, but I keep holding the pressure, he didn't learn what the correct response was, did he? So it's vital that you know when to release the pressure in order to reward your horse. So that means in the beginning, when you're first working with your horse on something new, even the slightest try needs to be rewarded with the release of pressure. Another aspect of pressure and release training is how you apply the pressure. So when you first ask your horse, you want to start with the lightest pressure possible, and then gradually increase the pressure if the horse doesn't respond. And the reason you do this is, number one, you're increasing the pressure so the horse is starting to get the hint, oh, okay, this is what you want me to do. So if he doesn't want to lower his head, I'll increase the pressure until he does, and then I'll release. But this also teaches the horse to respond to the lightest pressure rather than the toughest pressure. Because if I go right into this and just ask with like yanking down his head, that's the only pressure he's going to respond to. So now we're about to get into some exercises, and all the exercises I'm going to show you I use on horses when I first start them, just because this stuff can translate to being in the saddle too. So all these exercises I personally find useful. Our first exercise is teaching your horse to step forward to pressure. So this can help in a few different situations. So this can help if you have a horse that when standing tied, they tend to like pull back on the rope and fight the rope. So this will teach them to yield to that pressure, and instead of pulling back, they're going to step forward and give to that pressure. This can also be used if you're trying to get your horse on a trailer, and you can just apply that steady pressure until they'll step up on the trailer. If you have a lazy horse, you can also use this when leading them to get them to walk up with you rather than drag behind you. All you're going to do with this is I like to stand out in front of my horse a bit and to the side more, just so I'm not directly in front of them. And all I'm going to do, this seems super simple, is just pull lightly on the rope and just bring it through my hands. And you can see, even with the lightest pressure, Tucker will step forward with that. So we've been working a lot on that. Although it looks very simple, you'll be surprised how many horses initially fight the pressure. So when I say fight the pressure, I've had some that have literally like gone like this and ran back and reared. And then I've just had some who, instead of, immediately giving to the pressure, they'll throw their head up and then they'll go forward. So it's just, you want that smooth transition where the horse is immediately responding. So what you're going to do to start with this is you're going to start with the light pressure, and I'm just asking him to come towards me. So I'm just going to like gently take the rope and just gently pull on it, and you see he immediately steps forward. If you have a horse that fights that pressure, you're going to go, from gently asking to then just holding more of a moderate, steady pressure. And from there, if your horse is really fighting you, what I do is I just plant my feet and dig in and hold the rope at my hip. And I just will not let go of that pressure until the horse steps forward. So even if the horse is running backward and they're dragging me with them, I'm usually like this, holding that pressure until they'll give and step forward. With this, you have to remember that you are rewarding the slightest try. So even if the horse is fighting and then they suddenly give and they just put their neck forward, you can release that pressure in the beginning. So let's say you do have one of those horses that when they're standing tied, they like to fight against the rope and pull back. So this is an exercise you can actually do where you usually tie them. You can loop your loop through the post you tie against, and then I wouldn't tie it, but what you're going to do is you'll have your horse stand, then you can slide the rope through the post to get that pressure, and you can just work on it there as your horse is standing tied. And so that way you can help them, you know, step forward with the pressure, and if they start fighting, you'll just hold that pressure steady until they step forward. The next simple exercise I want to teach for teaching your horse to yield to pressure is just having the horse lower their head. So we kind of went over this at the beginning of the video, but I thought I'll just go over it again and also show other exercises you can do with this to help your horse really get confident in yielding to that pressure. So this is pretty simple, and when I teach this to a horse, I like to do it both ways in terms of I like to apply pressure to the lead rope, and then I'll also work on applying pressure to their poll, like behind their ears. And the reason for this is a horse may feel comfortable responding to this pressure, but a pressure behind their ears can be much more terrifying, just because it's like if they get their head stuck in something, it's going to limit them a lot more. So I like to do both ways, so I'll cover both ways. To start with the lead rope, all I'm going to do is apply a downward pressure here. And that's what it looks like. As soon as he responds, I'm going to release. So if you have a horse that's never done this, they will definitely fight the pressure to begin with. I've never had a horse that just immediately knows to follow that pressure down and lower their head. So what you're going to do is just hold that pressure until they lower. So a lot of times in the beginning, the horses will like jerk their head up and try to fight it, but you just hold that pressure steady until they even drop their nose super slightly, and then you go from there. So same thing with getting the horse to lower their head at the pole. I'll put my fingers behind the horse's ear, and I'm just going to press down, like imagine pushing your horse's head down to the ground. I'll start out lightly, and then I'll just gradually increase until he responds. Good boy. So that was very slight. So let's see if I can get his head all the way to the ground. And sometimes they'll avoid the pressure by doing that, by turning their head. So that's another instance where you will want to hold the pressure. And see, he's fighting me. There. We'll go to the ground. Good boy. So this is another technique that is going to really help horses that have trouble standing tied. Initially, if a horse doesn't know to yield to the pressure, they're going to fight. But now, once you've done the previous exercise and now this exercise, this is really going to help them start to understand the concept. This is also a great situation to teach your horse for starting to get your horse supple. So maybe under saddle, you want to start getting your horse more supple. This is a great place to start because the horse is having to engage their neck muscles and stretch through their neck muscles. Another reason I personally like this exercise is it teaches your horse to give to pressure if they were to ever get their head caught in something. So God forbid that happens, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. I've seen many horses get their heads stuck in fences or just stuck in like round pen panels, and it never ends good. So I wanted to teach Tucker to yield to this pressure. So in case he's ever in the situation, he's prepared. It's also good if you're, for whatever reason, your lead rope and your reins are on the ground, right? You know, I've seen many horses, they'll step on the lead rope, freak out, pull back, break the halter, run off. So now I should be holding my lead rope, but if I'm not, or if it's really long and he happens to step on it, he's not going to freak out now. He's going to give to the pressure and he should just stand there. Another exercise I like to do with this that will kind of mimic the situation of your horse getting their head caught in the fence is I take an extra lead rope and I'll put it around my horse's neck and I'll just apply that downward pressure and see he lowers. And I'll practice this a few times, and then I can practice just keeping his head in that position for an extended period of time. And see, Tucker's done this before, so as soon as that lead rope goes around his neck, he knows not to fight the pressure. But that's how I want him, because if he ever got his head stuck, at least he's not going to fight it and risk injury, you know? So that's just one example, and I'm not even applying pressure right now, but he just feels that lead rope on his neck, and he's immediately just lowering his head. Good boy. The next point I want to cover is teaching your horse to respond to pressure on their legs. So these exercises can be useful for numerous reasons. Number one, the most obvious, is for picking up your horse's hooves to clean them out. Another reason I like to teach this is because if the horse were to ever get their hoof stuck in something, instead of fighting the pressure and getting all cut up, they should just be able to stand there and not fight against it. So actually, I've had this happen to me. I fortunately had taught this to Tucker before this ever happened, but I taught Tucker how to yield to the pressure on his legs, and then we were out trail riding once, and suddenly we're just walking along and he stops moving, and I can tell he's picking up his feet to go step forward, but he's not going forward. So I looked down and he had a wire around his pastern. Since I had taught him to yield to the pressure, he immediately knew that it's better for him to yield to the pressure rather than fight it. So what I'm going to do in this exercise is I'm going to use my lead rope to ask my horse to pick up their feet. The reason I'm going to use the rope instead of my hands is because it just kind of gives me that leverage with the pressure. And it's also going to desensitize the horse to something else around their leg rather than my hand. Because many horses, they have it in their idea, like if I step here, go like this, oh, pick up your foot. But if they were to get their foot stuck in something like a rope, they may not respond the same way. So that's why I want to use the lead rope today. And what I'm going to do is first, before you do this, desensitize your horse to the rope around their legs. So I can just lightly put that around his leg, and I'll run it up and down like this. And do this on all your horse's legs before you go applying pressure, because some horses will not like this in the beginning. So you really need to just get them used to it. All right, so what I'm going to do from there is now I'm going to start with the pressure. So I like to just put my rope down around the pastern to begin with, and I'll just kind of pull it towards me, and see, he picks up his foot. And see, I can then put it down. And so you're going to do this where you apply the light, medium, and hard pressure if your horse doesn't respond. And in the beginning, your horse may just pick up their foot and want to put it back down. That's fine. You can reward that because that's them trying, and they're trying to understand what's happening too. So you want to make sure you're rewarding them for the right thing. Well, I'll see if I can just apply it here even. And you see he just gives there. He's very good at this. If he's stuck in a trap or in wire out on the trail or in a rope, he's going to give to wherever the pressure is pulling. So that's going to keep him from just freaking out and fighting against the pressure. And so see, I can just move his feet all around, and he is pretty good with that. Good boy. I just want to give a disclaimer here. Just because some horses really will not be comfortable with this in the beginning, you want to work slowly. If you start pulling on your horse's leg and they start freaking out, I do not recommend holding that pressure to where your horse is like falling down trying to escape it. That is not safe. You can release the pressure and then just start back at something easier. So maybe if they're really having trouble with their back leg, you can start back at their front leg and just still work on that. Because the thing with horses and pressure is once they understand it in one place, it's really easy to comprehend it someplace else. This next exercise is going to be very helpful if you have a horse that has trouble with steering. So this is going to just be bringing your horse's head back to their side, both directions, so both left and right. Good boy. And what this is going to do is it's teaching your horse to respond to that pressure on their face. So when you go to get on and start your horse, when you're trying to steer, this is going to help them out a lot, because they're going to suddenly be like, oh, I feel pressure right here. That means I go this way. Another reason this is really helpful is it's going to start helping your horse get supple and flexible as you ride them. So they're going to be flexing these muscles through here, and that's really going to help them round and push through their neck. All right, so to start this, I notice a lot of people have a problem because when you initially go to ask your horse to turn their head, they like to move their feet. So where I like to start with this, I like to stand back by the horse's withers. All I do is I pick up on my lead rope, or you can put the bridle on and do this with the bridle if you want to teach your horse to steer. And I just wiggle my fingers and have them tilt their nose that way. So see, his nose is kind of tilted that way. You can just start there. It's not much, and your horse isn't really engaging their muscles, but it's just gonna help them understand the concept. So I can get him to tilt there, good boy. So from there, what I can do is I'm back at the withers, and I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna bring my hand around and bring my hand back to the wither too, and see how he brings his head all the way around. So what I'm exactly looking for here is when I bring his head around, is I want him to dip his nose, and I'll point out like there. See how he dips and he gives? So as soon as he does that, I release. Good boy. Tucker's really good at that. This is something you can do if you're on your horse and sitting on your horse. Just take your hand down your rein and then bring it back to your hip. So if your hip's right here, same thing. So as soon as he just dips his nose, so he's not dipping, so we'll hold that pressure until he does. And see, that's a fight right there. Dip. There, that was the dip. So that's a perfect example for y'all. So yeah, you'll just bring back to your hip and hold that pressure until they dip their nose. So So another way your horse may fight the pressure initially with this is they're going to try and move away from it. So this usually starts by them just stepping away with their hind end. So all you're going to do, if you're at the withers, you should be safe. Like your feet aren't going to get trampled on, and you're just going to go with your horse until they finally soften and stop. So I'll kind of show you. So see, he's initially just stepping away, but then he stops and he gives with his head so I can release. And I'll show you guys this way. If he's initially moving, I'll hold that pressure at the withers until he comes to a stop. And there he stops. I'll hold my hand there, and there he gives. Good boy. If you haven't noticed, I'm wearing my fancy new EQH Riding Club shirt. So you can get this in our merch store, which I'll put the link in the description. We have a bunch of different designs in there, so go check it out and see if there's anything you like. If this video was helpful for you, please give it a thumbs up so more people will see it, and stay tuned for more weekly horse videos.